Francis Ngannou busts into the top 10. So the WBC ranked Francis, and I would need too much of your time to explain to you why rankings in boxing matter financially and career-wise in a different way. I want to say more than, but I'll use the words in a different way than they do in MMA. There is actually some legal precedence that has to do with something called the Ollie Act, where a ranking in boxing can have impactful measures, whereas a ranking in MMA can be selected when it's helpful and it can be dismissed when it's not helpful. Or we'll look at this.com when that's good for us, and we'll look at this.com when it's not. The official rankings of an organization like the WBC, there's a lot more that goes into it that perhaps you're not aware. Now, that was a fast version. To get to this point, Francis gets ranked number 10. And the WBC president had told, now this is a really big deal that you understand this. Like, if you want to know what a good job Dewey Cooper and Eric Nixick did with Francis Ngannou, I mean, it's one of those stories that will just never get told. It's not what the sport's about. When you're an athlete, you're selfish. Me, whatever I need, my preparation, my training, my sleep, my food, whatever it might be, me. But when you're a coach, it's the exact opposite. You're completely selfless. And Dewey Cooper and Eric Nixick fit that category. But when you look at what a great job they did, I do have to give Coach Cooper even more credit that he'll never get in the first place. He's the one that brought this to us, and I don't believe, had he not brought this to us, that it would have happened. Coach Cooper went to the media after Francis and Fury's fight. He said the WBC president approached him in the ring and told him, I'm going to put Francis into the top 10. Now, that is a significantly different from an actual legal and business standpoint than what most people might be used to. I don't think the WBC president would have done it. I don't think he'd have honored it. Had Coach Dewey Cooper not gone to the media and said, this is what I was told. It's very different. You're told that. It's in passing. If you're the president and you're a leader and you say something, it matters. And Coach Dewey Cooper, as much as he looked out for Francis and as much as he prepared Francis, he looked out for Francis one more time, which was in that comment. So I got to give Coach Cooper credit. Now, when the rankings came out, that's a very interesting thing. It's very interesting because, and we knew when this was going to happen, right? We knew when this was going to happen, that if it did happen, the problem with it, like, it's a very nice thing to say, particularly in the moment when the president said this to Coach Cooper. You're drunk, you're high on excitement. Guys, we all shared in that. Remember how we felt when we couldn't believe what we saw. Shocked the world. Like, that's just a term you use. How many times has a sporting event actually shocked you? They're fun and you move on. Actually shocked you, actually changed the way of your fundamental belief in something, even if it's combat, right? It's one of those things. This was one of those moments. Imagine being a principal in that and you're in the ring. Like, you wouldn't really want to be taken at your word for things that might come out to your mouth while a microphone isn't on and you're just trying to pay a congratulations around, right? I know fighters that have told the other guy, hey man, I really thought you won. Like, trying to be just a sweet guy, sportsmanship and kind of smoothing things over. And then the guy that was said that to goes and tells the media, this is what he said. He admitted that he lost. Like, it's one of those things, like, in the ring. And I just bring that because if the WBC president was going to do it, even when this was speculated and prior to yesterday at 4, when they actually did do it, the problem becomes the follow-up question, which is, who are you going to replace? That becomes the problem. The top 10 heavyweights in the WBC rankings have all had 100 fights. I'm including amateur career, yes. They have all won at a minimum 91% of those matches. So you're going to take a guy, lifelong hard worker, did everything right, he goes through the system, however you want to break that down, but he's made that walk 100 times with over a 90% success rate. You're going to do all of those things and you're going to replace him by a guy who looked good. He surprised us. He did things we didn't think he could do. He's 0-1. You won't really get around that, right? But they did it. They did it, and they brought Francis in, and there was a part where that was really cool. It was cool because Dewey Cooper made that happen. That never would have happened. It wouldn't matter if the WBC president said that in the ring or not. It never would. He might have said it to 20 different people. It never would have happened if Dewey Cooper hadn't made that public. So let's just start with that. But then once it finally happens, you're staring at the list and you're going, okay, you got a guy who's 0-1. My record in the WBC is better than Francis's. I'm 0-0. I have a better record, but that's not a fair way to say it. We saw what the WBC president saw. We saw what the rankings committee saw. We saw what might be the best boxer in the world overall. We saw a guy that would crush Canelo. We saw a guy that would crush. I mean, I know I'm getting silly, but any size, any weight, like the heavyweight crown is a very different thing. Talk about pound for pound all you want. I don't really care about pound for pound. You stick a bunch of guys in an alley. Who comes walking out? That's the one that I care about. I don't care about the pound for pound championship. I care about the alley. I care about the back alley belt. That's the one that really matters. That's why we all got into the sport in the very first place. And I saw what might be the best boxer of all of them. And there was one licensed judge that agrees. And he possibly should be the champion of the world. And he possibly should be ranked number 1. Can we all agree on that? That's just a fair, and that's just right. So is that where we should have put him? If all of those things are true, if he looks so great, if he's so wonderful, if he possibly should be number 1, if a licensed judge says that he won the fight, if all of us truly believe that, why did we put him at 10? Why isn't he ranked number 1? Why isn't he ranked number 2? Why isn't he ranked number 3? Like, why did we come in at 10? So if I go and read the names of 11, 12, and 13, are you confident Francis can beat those guys? Because that's what your ranking says. They've had over 100 fights, and they've won over 90% of them, but you said a guy that's never won can beat them all. I happen to agree with you. I don't know that I have a huge problem with it, but is that what you're willing to say? Because that's what the ranking means. Now, let's go the other way. Do you really believe, based on what you saw, that you're forming this entire opinion and criteria? You don't have 2 pieces of evidence. You don't have 3 pieces of evidence. You have 1. You have 1 fight. You have 1 body of work. Are you sure, based on what you saw, that there's 9 guys that can beat that man? Because that's what you're saying when you put him at number 10. And it's a very interesting concept, and it wouldn't hold up in most other sports. It's wildly relevant in combat. Combat has no competitive architecture. It's one of the few sports that's like that. Like, if you really want to know who the great boxer is, there's only one way to know, which is the Olympic Games. It's the only form of combat that has a competitive architecture where everybody on earth that thinks they have a shot can raise their hand at some point in the 4-year process, and then they can show up to a tournament on Saturday. And over the 4-year process, they'll whittle it down. And they'll get you to a round of 32, into 16, into 8, into the semifinals. Put the 2 best against each other until somebody wins. That's the Olympic Games. That's known as a competitive architecture. If you were to ask me, how do I become an NFL champion? I could actually answer the question for you. Try to talk about clearinghouse and explain a little bit of the NCAA and explain about a couple of years, and I tell you how the draft works. But eventually you get on a team and you land yourself in the playoffs, and then you make sure that team has more points than the other guy when time runs out, and you do that a few times till you're in a game called the Super Bowl. Then you have more points than the other team runs out, and they call you Super Bowl champion. I can explain it to you. And people ask me all the time, how do I get in the UFC? And I can give them an answer, but it's not guaranteed. Like, if they do everything that I say, they aren't guaranteed to get in. I mean, you guys understand, it's very important. So when you have a ranking, see, this is all that we have. We don't have anything else. You don't know who the best boxer is. Of course you do. How would you know? Unless you have a tournament, they whittle down, you're just left to guess. And over a period of time, you beat so many guys, and you can feel pretty confident, right? You got to run like Roy Jones. You got to run like Mayweather. You can feel pretty damn confident, but there's other times you can't. Evander Holyfield told anybody that would listen he could beat Mike Tyson. Anybody. This wasn't different eras, by the way. Evander Holyfield's actually older. There wasn't different sizes. Evander was actually smaller. He told anybody that would listen I could beat the guy. But the world told us Mike Tyson was the champion. Told us he was the best in the world, and we all believed that was true. And then eventually they put those guys together. It turned out Evander was right. And when you look at the fact that Evander was lighter and older, you realize there was not a day of Mike Tyson's life that he should have been world champion. There was not a day that he was the world champion, which is supposed to represent being the best in the world. I'm not looking to be a dick. I'm trying to share the significance with you of having a competitive architecture where you can prove it and not where it's all opinion-based. If you write somebody down in an official ranking like the WBC, that will hold up through the test of time. There will be assumptions and there will be expectations that they beat the guys in front of them, or they beat a majority of the guys in front of them, or they beat some guys in front of them. Top 25 and top 20 and top 15, you're going to assume that everybody on that top 10 list beat some guys that they're in front. They beat 12, 13, 14, 17, 18, however you want to do it. And you know what? You'd be right for 9 of those guys. But the current guy, Francis Ngannou, didn't beat any of them. He didn't fight them. And I don't disagree with his ranking, by the way. I saw what you saw. I'm discussing one of the problems with doing it. And if we're going to do things this way, and we're going to do things based on public opinion, what we think, and what we think potential, what we think expectations, like we've got a few surprises lately, haven't we? Because don't forget, Francis Ngannou going to a sport that he had never done and possibly being the best to do it. It would seem as though what we've seen out of Alex Pereira, who has an amateur record, he just broke into double digits, but he's already been a world champion, not once, twice. Not of the same division, 2 different divisions. It would just seem that perhaps Alex Pereira could have won the championship on his very first day. I won't go any further than that. He could have. He was good enough to. They could beat him, but he could beat them too. Can we agree on that? Because that's the spot that Francis was in. It looked like Francis could beat anybody, and there might be some guys that could beat him. And as a matter of fact, the judges couldn't even agree. But can we agree that's still a pat on the back? Can we at least agree that same thing for Pierre? Because if we're learning these things and we're observing these things, and we're going to put a guy at number 10 on an official ranking that can actually affect your career, that has federal mandates that can be tied to that, it would seem as though we've learned a lesson. I'd be happy with that lesson. And I would quickly ask you, how long do we have to play this game with Chimaev? Because we all saw that early on too, and we all told you, and we told the media, and we told the promoters, and we told the other fighters, and time went by, and it turned out we were all right, weren't we? But we're doing it again. It's not just with Chimaev. We're telling you the same thing with Bo Nickel. Just for example, and I'm just wondering, how long do we have to wait? How many times do we have to have surprises before we realize we don't quite know as much about this sport as we thought we did? And if you're going to put a guy at number 10 in the world that's never fought before, you're going to have a perception that he beat the guys he's in front of, but that didn't happen. And if you're going to put him at number 10 in the world, you're also right? You're showing your courage. You're showing your understanding, your wisdom. You watch something, and by God, you've got the courage. I don't care that he's 0-1. I know what I'm looking at. I'm an expert in this sport, and that's why I'm putting it at number 10. Then you're also saying you believe 9 guys can beat him. So I saw what you saw. I saw what the WBC saw. I saw a surprise. I saw some greatness. I saw that we're going to have to admit we had this one wrong. But you can't have it both ways. I can't cut the line in front of a number of guys, none of which I've beaten, showing that bravado, courage, and understanding that only I have, my deep knowledge of the sport based on 30 minutes of athletic competition. I can't do that and tell you that 9 guys can beat him unless I really think there's 9 guys that can beat him, and they don't think that, but they put him at 10 anyway. So he didn't beat the 10 that he was in front of, or anybody else for that matter, and you've got 9 in front of him that you don't actually think could beat him. So why did you put him at 10? You're going to show your courage and your bravado and how great you are. Why didn't you put him where you really think he is? You're arguing that he should fight Tyson. You want to see him fight Tyson. It's the most money and the biggest fight to fight Tyson. So if he's going to fight Tyson, and that's really what you think, why did you not put him number 1?